Come on, Livingston. We gotta go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We gotta go on and on and on. Come on, Livingston.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across, it's turned in! It's Pittman who's got it! Livingston leads!
Road is long.
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien.
Lead! And Livingston have the lead!
Man, can score.
If we march together.
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates! And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
Come on, Livingston.
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Come on, Livingston. We gotta go.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Livi, the podcast dedicated to everything Livingston Football Club and Scottish football, and proudly sponsored by Strana Apparel. My name's Euan, and today I'm joined by Angus. Angus, how you doing, mate?
So much better on this podcast than it has for a lot of the other ones you and we have.
Yay!
So there's a slight blip of negativity, but for the most part, it's overall very, very positive. Much more happy. The difference that kind of makes on you going into the new week, absolutely tremendous. Let's hope that we can continue that off with the final week of the season. But yeah, what about yourself, mate? How are you doing?
Oh, God, what a difference a win makes. Oh, my whole weekend just had a much more positive outlook about it as of kind of 5:15 on Saturday evening. It just felt so much better after watching what was a good result, first and foremost, but also a very good performance to go with it, which we'll obviously come on to talk about, along with the women's game as well, which saw them wrap up their season as well as the league title. But as always, you can find this episode, as well as all our others, on your preferred podcast streaming site. Just search for Talk Livi, so follow us or subscribe to ensure that you don't miss another episode.
We'll kick the episode off by discussing Livi's victory over struggling Dundee United as a return to home comfort, so a return to winning ways.
Next up, we look back at the Lionesses' final game of the season, as despite defeat to Rossvale, it was party time on Trophy Day.
Motherwell are the visitors to the Tony Mac on Wednesday. We'll look ahead to our final home game of the campaign.
Finally, I caught up with St Johnstone fan Elliot Menzies to preview our final game of the season in Perth.
The Lions returned home on Saturday, which also saw a return to winning ways as goals from Bruce Anderson and James Penrice secured a 2-1 victory over Dundee United. Euan, we've already kind of touched on it. Very, very happy to get a win there. What were just your overall thoughts on the game?
Just so much better. We looked so much more like ourselves from the get-go, I thought. It was an overall very good performance, I thought. And we spoke about it in our preview for the game, that you need to bear in mind that the teams we're up against in this bottom six, certainly the Ross County, Kilmarnock and Dundee United games in particular. Now St Johnstone have obviously secured safety now, so going into that final game of the season, but you knew fine well that they had so much to play for going into these final 5 games of the campaign. So for us to get results, we were going to have to go in there and match their desire, their commitment, their aggression on the pitch. And I thought we did that in abundance and more at the weekend. And a massive, massive credit to Bruce Anderson. I think he set the tone as well for the majority of the afternoon from the front, and that kind of filtered through, I thought, the rest of the team. And Bruce has gone on a little dry spell recently. His last goal was that Kilmarnock game at the start of February. That was his last goal for the club. Despite we've talked about it on the podcast, he's worked hard in games. He's put in a lot of effort, but he's not been getting the rewards in terms of goals that you would like to see Bruce get. And that's kind of what he thrives off is goals as a striker. So I was delighted to see Bruce get back on the score sheet at the weekend. It's a hopeful ball up the park by Christian Montano, but Bruce has gambled as any good striker would do in that situation. Aina and Birighitti have, had a disaster, to put it bluntly, but don't take anything away from Bruce. He's nipped in there, got a touch, very tight angle. You're down that end of the pitch as well, and he's managed to loop it into the far corner with his weak foot as well. It was a fantastic finish by Bruce. And we almost had a second goal, which was through Luigi De Lucas. However, it was ruled out for handball after a VAR check. Credit to Don Robertson, he blew for it very quickly to give the handball. It was obviously checked, and I think it's actually from Christian Montano, the handball, which I would probably agree with. It's led directly to the goal, so no issues there with that being ruled out. But then we concede that equaliser. It actually reminds me a little bit of the goal that Dundee United got, the equaliser last time at Livi. It's a kind of hopeful ball in the air. Rory McLeod's just managed to keep the ball in play. De Lucas could maybe head the ball a bit further or wider rather than back out to the edge of the 18-yard box. But again, it's a terrific finish by Ian Harkes on the volley into the corner. Don't think you can have any go at Shamal George for that one. It's a very good strike. But we had a couple other kind of chances in that first half. Stephen Kelly's had a free kick, roof of the net. Christian Montano's had an effort from the edge of the box, just gone wide, whistle past the post. But second half, I thought we really stepped it up a gear again, and again showed a lot of aggression in our play. And Stephen Kelly had an effort from the edge of the box again, but he's made a pretty comfortable save. But then the goal, I think, summed up that aggression in our play at the weekend. First of all, Montano winning that ball in the middle of the park, takes ball and man, just aggressive in terms of winning the ball. It's a great little nod from Stephen Kelly to put it into the path of James Penrice. And I know you probably looked at the team sheet on Saturday, Angus, and saw James Penrice on the right-hand side. At this point, he'd been switched out to the left-hand side, and it's a great take by Penners on the chest and then on the half volley into the far corner. Fantastic finish from Penners. And I made a point of saying to my dad, after Penners' game against Ross County, where he played on the right-hand side, I was sitting next to Callum Waugh, who used to contribute to this podcast, and he said Penners has done nothing in this game and then whipped in a brilliant ball to the back post for Joel Newbley to score. So I decided to kind of follow suit, and I turned around to my dad and went, maybe this might work. It's like, Penners hasn't been involved in the game a great deal so far. So then Penners goes and follows it up with a goal. So might need to keep that going every week from now on, and Penners might become our top goal scorer at some point. But yeah, I think if anything, we look more likely to add to our lead at that point. Bruce Anderson had a good opportunity where he's cut inside on his left foot, dragged it past the post. Bradley's had another effort on goal, but Birighetti's made a pretty comfortable save. Albeit Dundee United had a big chance from Peter Pawlett. Big save by Shamal George, spread himself really well. And I think we had another couple opportunities on the break. Stephen Bradley's put one over the bar. But overall, for me, really, really good performance. I think it's something the fans have been looking for. And I think it just shows you that kind of night and day between our home and away form. Because actually, when you look at our home form this season, it's been very good for the most part. We've won our last 3 at home as well. So it really is just kind of the away form that's let us down massively over the last few months, to be honest. But really happy with the result, really happy with the performance. As you can probably tell the way I'm talking about it, it's just a massive kind of relief. And I think you could see that from Davey at the end of the game as well. Big relief for him to get a result as well.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it obviously when we were about to preview the game and stuff like that, that at the end of the day, we weren't really too fussed about the result at this kind of stage of the season now, that, there's not really anything left to play for. What was important was that, there was that effort, there was that determination, there was that drive and everything like that. If we came away from that, had drawn, and yet the performance was still the same, sure, there'd be like elements of disappointment regarding like the result and all that, but there would be so much more encouragement from, the way that we actually applied ourselves. And I think that is just the biggest takeaway from it as well. It was a performance of Livingston from, the past kind of couple of years, maybe from when we first came up to through Gary Holt's kind of reign and that, where that hard work and tenacity, outworking the opposition in the middle of the park. Somebody gets beat, there's another player out there to follow it. There's players backing each other up. We're winning, intercepting balls. We're putting them under pressure. We're forcing them into mistakes. We're capitalising on their mistakes. And I think that was encapsulated by, the final, 20 minutes or so where, Dundee United were coming out a little bit and, we were kind of picking them off, taking the ball and breaking on them, which was, a very key feature for us in, past seasons. I don't know if that's maybe something that's, suited us better where, we've actually been playing a team here who is wanting to be on the ascendancy, who's expected to go and attack and all that. It's allowed us to maybe relax a little bit more and then kind of, break on them when it's been possible. To be able to do that, though, you need to be able to be solid in your own defensive line. And I think that as well is something that is absolutely massive in that game. How many times this season, we've maybe went into games maybe trying to do that and we've conceded an early goal or whatever like that. I think on Saturday there was just a clear difference in terms of how we defended our own box. I think Davey came out and said that there was a massive difference there. And even with, multiple changes throughout the match to, whoever was going into defence, maybe we get quite lucky with our first goal where, Boys and DeLucas go for the same header and it falls quite nicely to Montano as opposed to a Dundee United player where you go up and score straight away. But other than that, there's not really kind of too many moments of shakiness I don't remember. And I think that even like something as simple like Tom Parks coming on, there was one of the headers that he jumped up to about 10 feet in the air and like the ball went about 50 yards as well. And just like that kind of lift that it gives you, that's like something that we've been missing. Like how many times we header and it just kind of drops into like the middle of the park. No, it just came straight back from where it came from, and if not further as well. And that just lifts you as a whole, just knowing that, at that kind of moment, you're just going to put your foot through it. And it's actually something I would like to credit Nicky Devlin for tremendously as well, was that, Nicky's obviously, there's been the things that have came out about his move to Aberdeen, not from himself or our club. And obviously a lot of people kind of talking about his commitment and stuff like that. Watching that game on Saturday there, I don't think anybody can say anything bad about him at all. The way that he was flying into those challenges was, the Nicky Devlin that we've been used to seeing for these 4 seasons that he's been at the club. And I think that again, like that, those kind of tackles, those kind of crunching tackles is what kind of gets like the fans like lifted and, gets a bit of momentum going and, kind of like seeps through the club. And I've got to give huge credit to, to the team for kind of getting involved in that. We kind of differ in opinion here, but I thought Omiyongo when he came on was absolutely vital in kind of continuing that as well. But he was tremendous at winning the ball. I think maybe, as you say, maybe a wee bit slack on the ball at times. But in terms of coming on and, winning it and springing those attacks and stuff like that, it was just, this is all kind of like simple stuff, Euan, isn't it? But it's what we really have been missing. And that's why it is standing out massively as to why we're waxing lyrical over it. But, it's really, really been that we've been missing for so long, right?
Yeah, just to touch on the wee bit about Omiyonga, we were chatting about it yesterday at the women's game. I credit Omiyonga in terms of what he's good at, and I think he did well at the weekend when he came on, which was breaking the game up, and he's always been very good at that. I thought he was maybe a little bit slack in possession at times. That would have been my only criticism, but overall his contribution was very good when he came on. I'm just going to touch on the bit about Nicky Devlin. I think probably the one negative from the afternoon is to hear that there was some boos for Nicky. I can't understand it. I can't understand why anyone would go and boo one of their own players. At the end of the day, Nicky is still a Livingston player until the end of the season. Yes, it does appear that he's signed a pre-contract with Aberdeen. To make it very clear, neither club had released that. Nicky Devlin had not released that. That has been leaked by somebody, which is, I agree with Davey, has put immense pressure on Nicky going into this game, 24 hours beforehand, because everyone's going to be questioning him. And, I've said kind of after we missed out on top 6, giving Jamie Brandon a go, it's not because I question Nicky's commitment. It's because Nicky wasn't going to be here next season. It was more to see what Jamie Brandon's got to offer. No point would I question Nicky's commitment. And again, you said that on Saturday. He was magnificent at right back and he looked right back to his best. What I would say is Declan Gallagher and Craig Halkett signed pre-contracts with Motherwell and Hearts. I do not remember the same uproar from our fans when those guys left the football club. And pre-contracts are part of football. It's part and parcel of football. These guys this is a job for them. They need to secure their future. And I don't blame Nicky. It's a fantastic move from him, and I wish him all the best at Aberdeen. I want our fans to remember what Nicky has done over his 4 years at the football club. 2 top 6 finishes, a League Cup final, captain for 2 of those seasons, a near ever present, and an individual who absolutely wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think on Wednesday night against Motherwell, Nicky deserves a fantastic send-off from the fans, because when we look back in a few years' time, we'll look back at Nicky as being one of the best fullbacks the club's had. And I'm not just saying this because we're sponsors of Nicky. Absolutely not. I think he has been a fantastic servant for the football club, nearly 150 appearances for Livingston. And he deserves a fantastic send-off from every single supporter, regardless of your thoughts on moving. At the end of the day, he's going on to better things by going to Aberdeen. He's probably improved his financial package significantly. You need to bear in mind Nicky's just had a child recently. He's got to look after himself, and it's a great move going to Aberdeen. They're one of the biggest clubs in the country, and as I say, I wish Nicky nothing but the best in his move, and I hope the fans can appreciate what he's done for the football club.
Just to chime in on that as well, like, you look at this 5-year spell, and it's probably been, consistently one of the most successful parts of our club's history. Nicky Devlin's been part of 4 of those 5 seasons in this top flight. You're genuinely putting him next to the likes of McNamee in terms of, if you're thinking of like a greatest 11 for Livingston at right back. And yeah, as you say as well, like, there's plenty of people who've moved on and there's not really been that kind of scrutiny and whatnot. You look at the likes of, somebody who's quite close to Nicky Devlin, John Guthrie, who, we did have the contract for and essentially bought himself out. We still remember him very, very fondly for everything that he did. Even the likes of Craig Sibbald on Saturday got applauded coming off the park by, members of our support. Nicky deserves, so much, because, he's been a great representative for our club, being at a cup final, captain does last season and this season, and just genuinely just being a really good player over the course of the 4 years. We shouldn't be, kind of treating a player like this, who has given so much. Sure, the last 6 months haven't gone as planned, but I don't think that, he deserves anything like that. And, what does that say about the rest of the players who are probably going to be moving on? He looks of like Joel Nubley's is possibly going to be leaving in the summer. I would imagine teams are already kind of feeling out and stuff like that for kind of players like this. Like, we're not going to have that same reaction. So it just seems a bit odd for me. I don't understand booing players in general when you're, you could maybe boo a bad performance or something like that, but if you're individually targeting players, I will never ever understand that. Never mind our club captain, never mind one of the best servants in our club. Yeah, very, very odd.
Yeah, to kind of chime in on that again, have Nicky's performances dropped in the last 3 months? Yeah, they have, right? And I'm sure Nicky would be the first to admit that. But you could say that about every single member of that dressing room just now. And I'm sure, again, they would all admit that the performances haven't been up to the levels in the last few months. But if you use the Halkett Gallagher one as an example, I think we won 3 of our last 21 games that season, and they'd signed pre-contracts elsewhere. And again, I don't remember the same uproar. And Craig Halkett was club captain as well when he moved on. And that's not me having a dig at those players, by the way, because as I say, it's part and parcel of football, and they were fantastic servants for the football club in their spells with us. To kind of touch on another couple of individual performances from the weekend, I've already said I thought Bruce was fantastic and kind of set the tone for the whole team. I think a shout out to Shamal George. He's been getting a little bit of criticism online from our fans of late, and I think that save he made late on from Peter Pollitt, good to see him make a big save, which has contributed to the result in the end. You mentioned Tom Parks as well. We all know Tom Parks' injury problems that he's had over the last 18 months. I forgot to kind of mention it last week when he came on at Rugby Park. I was just so despondent about the game. I couldn't even think about probably the one positive from it, which was seeing him come on. But he came on at the weekend, was absolutely colossal at the back. And he did what you'd expect him to do, which is, head and clear anything that came near him. I think he's a kind of a defender's defender, isn't he, Tom Parks? And he just loves kind of that aggressive side of the game, which he done very well. And the way fans have reacted to his appearance at the weekend, it's like it's the second coming of Paolo Maldini, Tom Parks. So hopefully that continues into next season. And yeah, I thought there was a little shout out to Davey as well, because I think he touched on a couple of little tactical things he did during the game in his post-match. In particular, talking about kind of going back to front quite quickly to counteract Dundee United's press early on. And I think that caused them a lot of problems, us getting the ball forward quickly. But also I thought the little tweak he did with Nubley and Penners during the game as well. I have to say I thought Niskanen handled Nubley incredibly well in the first half of the game. out when Noobs was on the left-hand side. In the second half, he switched Penrice and Nubley. And then the second goal comes from Penners on that left-hand side, doesn't it? So you need to credit Davey, for a couple of the tactical tweaks that he made during the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to touch on Shamal George, every time he comes in for a Wagamama's the day before, a game, he pulls off an amazing save in that. So just saying, Shamal, if you ever, you're looking to continue that, you're more than welcome any time. I think the last one would have been the Hearts 0-0 when he made that save off of the boy Kual. So there must be some theory to that. But I think just for us, Euan, it's just so much more pleasing just to see that kind of performance. They kind of touched on it on like sports scene and that following the game, that a lot of like the questioning was that a lot of people were heads on the beach or going for like sunbeds, as Davey bammed up Brucey about as well. So just kind of having that kind of performance that gives you a bunch of hope for next season as well, because in all honesty it was getting a bit doom and gloom, wasn't it? In terms of hearing about like also the finances as well, looking at the performances recently, it was just a real breath of fresh air there that you kind of had something to kind of hold on to. And yeah, hopefully it's something that can continue. Obviously a tough game on Wednesday before we round off the season on Sunday as well. Just hope for more of the same again. But yeah, very happy, 3 points, very chuffed.
We're delighted to have Strana Apparel as sponsors of Talk Livi. UK based with a Swedish soul, we are Strana. Strana is an independent fashion brand from Scotland who create high quality and stylish attire for on and off the terraces. Inspired by terrace culture, lifestyle and music, all their clothing is designed using quality materials and workmanship to combine the very best style and fit. All of this means you get a premium quality fashion at affordable prices while enjoying a simple and secure service.
As a bonus for Talk Livi listeners, you can get 10% off your order using the code TalkLivi at the checkout. We'll also have some exclusive giveaways during the season, so keep your eyes peeled on our socials for those too. And thanks to Sterner for sponsoring Talk Livi.
Our women's side wrapped up their SWF Championship campaign on Sunday against promotion chasing Rossvale. Despite falling to a 2-1 defeat, it was party mood as the Lionesses were presented with the league trophy. I guess first of all, we'll talk about the actual game that was taking place. I know pretty much everyone that turned up was probably there to see the trophy getting presented, but there was a game of football happening as well. What was your thoughts on the game itself?
Not great, to be honest. I think when, as Livingston as a club, whenever there's like a spectacle like this that goes on, it's very rare that the performances as matches up to that kind of thing as well. But yeah, it was overall quite a poor display in all honesty, and it was I think you could maybe tell that Rossvale had a lot kind of banking on the game. They came into the match sitting third place, 1 point behind Renfrew. Obviously, the game wouldn't matter too much in terms of there's a big game on Tuesday between those two sides that will decide ultimately who's in the playoff. But, they could have the chance to leapfrog them. So if it comes to a draw, they'd be in, the comfortable position. And I think that kind of came quite apparent in all honesty, that they were a wee bit more, I don't want to necessarily say fired up, but they were a bit more on it than we were. Again, I think for us, we were a bit flat. I don't think we were looking for the ball nearly enough. I think on the couple of rare occasions that we were getting the ball down, we did cause some issues, but quite simply, it didn't happen often enough. And I think that Rossvale were proven to be quite a threat. I think they were exploiting space quite well between, the wing backs and, the centre backs were on the other side, which then meant that, we constantly had people being dragged over out of position, which ended up leaving, kind of players back free, in the box and stuff like that. And I think that's essentially where the first goal comes from, where I think that the right back makes like an overlap and run. Obviously, plenty of time to put the ball in. I think it's a cross-come shot essentially where, it's just completely caught out Charlotte in the goal. And it all kind of comes down to not kind of tracking the players or, maybe not being quick enough to have somebody get out to there. So, yeah, I think they'll be disappointed with that kind of goal to concede as well. However, I think we responded fairly well. And I think it's a great bit of football by, Brogan Anderson, who battles very, very hard, takes on a couple of players, cuts it back, and Beth Mackay there to get, her second goal at home in the last kind of couple of weeks as well, which she'll be delighted about considering it took so long for her to get her first one. But yeah, kind of following that, there wasn't really too much for us to kind of talk about, in all honesty. In terms of chances created, there's not really too much more I can think of. I think we really, really struggled to get into their final third and create anything of note. I think it was very hopeful, but I've got to give credit to Rossvale. They kept on battling away. Second half comes in, and again, it's that kind of issue where, players are being dragged out to follow different players, and eventually there was somebody left at the back post who could just hit it into the back of the net as well and put it 2-1 up. And in all honesty, I don't think it's anything less than what Rossvale deserved. I think that they were the better team, and I don't think anybody will massively disagree with that. They're just kind of maybe a wee bit more hungrier on the day, maybe a wee bit better in terms of keeping the ball and, knocking it around. So I think we'll be disappointed a little bit in terms of that performance, but at the end of the day, Euan, as well, it's come down to the last day of the season, getting the trophy and stuff like that. The minds could be elsewhere. It's more so like a meaningless game and stuff like that, but not that the players wouldn't want to, be trying their hardest and go off on a high and stuff like that. But yeah, it just kind of wasn't our day. Nothing was really coming off for us. But yeah, anything else to add to that?
I think you're bang on. I think you're bang on with your assessment of the game. It was a case of, we've talked about this with the men's side as well. Rossvale have got evidently a lot more to play for in these split games than we have after wrapping up the league title with a couple of games to spare. So yeah, I think Rossvale looked very threatening. I thought our back three almost looked a little bit exposed at times. I don't think there was a great deal of protection in front of the back three, and that's probably where Rossvale looked really threatening on the counter-attack, in particular when they turned the ball over pretty quick. They had a chance early doors, which kind of set the tone for that. Big save from Charlotte Ferguson with a 1v1. And as you say, the goals got a tad of fortune about it. It's definitely a cross, in my opinion, and it's just caught out Charlotte Ferguson, unfortunately. But did get back into the game, as you mentioned. Fantastic bit of football by Brogan Anderson. Gets to the byline, cuts the ball back, and it's an easy tap in for Beth Mackay coming in off the right-hand side, which you would want your wingers to be doing. So very good to get back in the game at that point. But I'm glad you were able to assess the Rossvale winner there, because I was still walking around the pitch after chatting to Callum Carson. So I was at the opposite end of the park, so I didn't quite catch how it all happened. So your on-the-ball reporting is much appreciated this week, Angus, unlike previous weeks where it's been, let's just say, questionable. But yeah, as you mentioned,
wow, what is that?
But as you say, there was a kind of lack of clear-cut opportunities created. I've got in my notes here, there was a couple of efforts from Beth Mackay, one which landed on the roof of the net, and a free kick, which, it was an easy enough save for the Rossvale keeper. But yeah, I think Rossvale thoroughly deserved the points, and it's probably the one thing I would say over the last couple of seasons is Rossvale as a team seemed to have proved to be our bogey team a little bit over the last couple of seasons, and they've often found a way to get the points against us. But as we say, the main spectacle of the afternoon was getting presented with the SWF Championship title.
Before we go into that, actually, there's one thing that I've just remembered about the game, which I think is an interesting talking point. A couple of changes during the match, substitutions coming on. One of them is what we've seen Captain Natasha Frew go into the middle of the park. And one of the things that we've kind of talked about quite a lot in here has been kind of, maybe not so much like a proper issue like in there, but somebody getting on the ball kind of deep, maybe like bringing it out, getting people involved in the game, like a lot of tenacity and stuff like that. I thought when she went into the middle of the park there, it made quite a massive difference. I think that's where we started to look a bit more comfortable knocking the ball around and all of that. What do you make of that change? And, would you be, obviously, if we've got maybe some players, to be able to go into centre back, would you like to see this maybe more so in the future?
It's definitely an option, isn't it? I agree with you. Tash has been very good at in the back three, playing on the right-hand side of that three, being very good at coming out on the ball from that position, driving from deep, and obviously pushing her a little bit further forward into that kind of almost couple of holding players in the shape that we were playing. It suited her. It suited her coming out on the ball and getting involved in the play a little bit higher up the pitch. So it's definitely an option which the coaching staff can look at for the future.
Yeah, I thought she looked very, very comfortable when dropped into there. I was really impressed in all honesty. Keeping the ball, maintaining it. There was quite a couple of times where she maybe overran it and then still came out with it, passing the ball away and that as well. So I think that was, actually a positive to take away from the game, which maybe will be looked at as, well, to be fair, nobody's really going to care too much about the game. It's going to be mainly about the celebrations afterwards and that. But yeah, definitely something that maybe worth kind of thinking of, going into the new season and stuff like that. Maybe, or even if as you're chasing a game, or if you're looking for that change to add a little bit of something into the middle of the park. I was actually quite impressed by that. But yeah, as you say, you were going to go on to say, you and I believe, about the celebrations that came on after. I think that this is maybe one of the nicest moments I kind of think that we'll ever see at the club in terms of both the men's team and the women's team, in all honesty. To begin with, getting the guard of honour from Rossvale and, having the players all coming out with, I assume, like relatives or like family friends and stuff like that, like walking out with children of like who they're have like a relationship with that with. I think that was really kind of special to see, because it's all about the women's game, trying to involve more people and inspiring that next generation. And events like this are very, very pivotal in doing so. Obviously, then getting to see them lift a trophy and all of that is showing exactly what can be done. And then obviously having the media guys there, the photographers, and even like Sid Blair and that, the coverage that they're giving them, it's given these people, it's given young girls growing up what we've probably been so lucky to have, Euan, where we've grown up with like footballers as being like held on this pedestal where there's all this coverage and stuff like that, and we've probably taken that for granted for like our kind of like heroes and that. Whereas now that you're kind of seeing that developing gateway for girls to have the same. But it's not just like incredibly, just nice and encouraging to see.
It's very heartwarming for somebody that has a little shriveled up black heart like myself. It's very heartwarming to see, to be honest. The girls coming out with, be it their kids, nieces, nephews, family relatives coming out onto the pitch, and they were involved on the pitch for the celebrations as well, which was fantastic to see. And a little shout out to our sponsor, which is Nicola Sturrock. I know Nick very well, having worked with her when she was working at Spartans, and Nick gave her medal. I know Nick's not been able to be involved due to work commitments a lot this season, but she gave her medal to a young girl, Daisy. Gary Kerr, who I know listens to the podcast, has started taking his wee girl down to the women's games, and she's been absolutely loving it when she's been there, and she's got a little bit of history there. She's got a league winners medal from their first ever league title, so probably made the wee girls week and weekend. So little things like that, which is fantastic. And as you say, there's a lot more coverage coming of the women's game of late in recent years. Use the SWPL title race as an example. 3 big teams in Glasgow City, Rangers and Celtic on the final day going for it, and you've got 10,000 folk at Celtic Park and 10,000 folk at Ibrox as well. It's great to see the women's game getting that coverage now as well. And big hats off to the media team. They put a lot of content out there for the women's side, and it lets everyone get a kind of inside scoop as to the women's team. But it would also be great to see a few more bums on seats coming down to watch the women's team on a Sunday. And big incentive with the new season ticket is that your season ticket for the men's team acts as your season ticket for the women's team as well. So hopefully that does encourage a few more folk, if they're at a loose end on a Sunday, to come down and watch them, which is going to be another historic campaign for them, stepping up into SWPL too.
I think as well, it's rightfully that we talk about, the kind of the coaching staff as well. I think that this has been a kind of like a process that's came from, I believe that the team was part of, was it Blackburn United? Yeah. And it's kind of moved over. Obviously, last season being their first season due to like the COVID struggles and all of that. I think they deserve great credit for, what they've done to the club, how they've kind of, where they've taken the club essentially in such kind of short time. 2 seasons in, now they're up to, the second tier of Scottish football. They're going to be playing against some decent teams as well. And I think, the effort that those guys have put in, I think, 5 or 6 coaches overall, the time that they've like dedicated to the team, can't fault those guys at all as well. So very, very appreciative of those efforts from the likes of from Paul, Stevie, Dave, Connor, Jordan. Yeah, absolutely tremendous. I think Ali as well. I think it's the fitness coach. Yeah, all those efforts over the season have been greatly appreciated. And again as well, Euan, we've got to big massive thanks to the players for making it such an enjoyable campaign as well. We've talked about it the last kind of 6 months or so, that they've been the shining light for the most part of the season. And they're an absolute great bunch of players, great bunch of lassies who been fortunate to speak to in that, as opposed to like as working for like the courier and stuff like that, like getting to talk to them and all of that, and they're all absolutely tremendous, easy to deal with and all of that, and just an absolute great bunch who deserve everything that they've worked very hard for. Obviously, it's not been there'll be dips in that in a season and that, but they've always bounced back from any adversity tremendously well, and then put on some absolutely tremendous performances. So yeah, massive credit to them. Congratulations from us and everybody associated with Livingston, and history's been made. Next up for Livy, in our final home game of the campaign, the Lions will welcome Motherwell on Wednesday night. Euan, Motherwell have been a team that we've not had great joy against over the past couple of seasons. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I've not really had the time to kind of go into stats and things like that, but I would assume our record since promotion has been pretty sketchy against Motherwell, to say the least. I'm trying to think back at home. We beat them in our first season up 2-0. Stevie Lawless, Craig Halkett scored the goals. The following season, I think we drew 0-0 and won 1-0. Aaron Taylor-Sinclair scored. COVID season, I don't think we won a game against them. And then last season, we lost one and drew one. So, 2 wins over that period of time over Motherwell. It's not a great record. And then we all know our record at Fir Park is catastrophic, to put it bluntly. But Motherwell are a completely different animal since Stuart Kettlewell's gone in there. I saw the Football Writers Manager of the Year awards, and Barry Robson was nominated. I think if Barry Robson's getting nominated, I think Stuart Kettlewell probably deserved a nomination in that as well, the way he's turned Motherwell's fortunes round. I think a lot of people had them down as being almost favourites to get relegated before Hamill departed and Kettlewell came in. So a massive credit to him for the job that he's done there over the course of the season. But I think it's evident to see that a large portion of Motherwell's successes came down to one individual and one individual only, which is Kevin Van Veen. You mentioned a few weeks ago we got posed an interesting question on our question time, and you said if Kevin Van Veen could be shot from Scottish football, you would do it in a heartbeat. And I think he's just broke a post-war record, which is 9 consecutive games in a row that he's scored for Motherwell. Don't know what his tally is for the season, but he's definitely in the high 20s, I think, for the campaign. And he got another one at the weekend, a 99th minute penalty to kind of break Ross County hearts. And it's safe to say that he's the danger man that we're going to have to be very, very wary of. And he's already caused us an abundance of problems this season. He scored the equaliser at the start of the year against us, won each draw, scored a couple in the recent game at Fir Park as well. So, yeah, we're going to need to be very alert to that. And he also scored the winner in the opening game at Fir Park. So he's already got 4 against us in 3 games. So I think we know who we need to be very wary of at the weekend. But it's a very difficult game. It's possibly a decider, essentially, for who gets 7th place. If Motherwell were to come in and win the game, that would be it wrapped up for them, and a very good season, given where they were at an earlier stage in the campaign under Stevie Hamill, as I say. But yeah, it's going to be a very difficult game. I think you can kind of half expect what you're going to get from Motherwell. Very aggressive, physical, maybe not the prettiest game on the eye at times, but it's about kind of matching, as we mentioned in previous games, matching that desire, matching that commitment, matching that physicality across the park, and hopefully you can come out on top and then start to play your football from there. But it's going to be a very difficult game against a very informed side.
Yeah, I think feel a little bit better coming into this now that we've had that performance there. Coming into this, if we didn't have that and we still looked, quite fragile, especially at home, I'd be quite terrified, especially about coming up against Van Veen. And I think that's going to be a massive test for us on Wednesday. It's going to be him against, whatever centre-back pairing is there. If it's still Lucas, who's still kind of getting accustomed to the Scottish game. If it's Parks, if he's able to start, still coming back to full fitness and all of that, will he be up to the task against somebody like Van Veen? Boyce has been injured quite a bit recently as well. I don't know the extent of what's happened there, illnesses as well. And then Fitzwater, who wasn't in the squad either. So it's like, that's going to be the make or break for it seems essentially is going to be how we manage to deal with him. Hopefully, though, at the other end, we'll be able to cause them some issues as well with, like Anderson and like Newbley up top as well, because, it might be easy to forget that, we have players who can cause problems on our own. It's going to be a very tough game. I don't think it's going to be a pretty one at all. So those battling tendencies are going to have to be there for sure. But, hopefully it's one that we can come out on the better end of.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, you've talked about it there. I think one of the key elements in how the game is going to pan out is that individual battle, isn't it, between the centre halves and Kevin Van Veen. We don't want to make this a Kevin Van Veen loving, essentially, but it's quite obvious that he's the main threat for Motherwell at least.
He's that good though. He genuinely is.
Yeah, he's been excellent this season. But to kind of touch on the centre half element of it, we saw Morgan Boys and DeLucas paired up at the weekend. We had spoken the Dundee United preview about how Stephen Fletcher could cause them a lot of problems because of his physicality, how good he is in the air. Granted, he didn't feature at the weekend. I thought DeLucas had a very good performance overall, but he was up against a 17-year-old, a very inexperienced forward, and Rory McLeod. How do you feel if DeLucas was coming up against Van Veen? He had a difficult afternoon against them at Fir Park a few weeks ago.
You're just going to have to hope that the lessons have kind of been learned. The track record, I guess, maybe makes it a little bit concerning, considering the last time against Van Veen and then also that game against St Mirren with Curtis Main. Hopefully that we can maybe get beyond the 10-minute mark without being 2 goals down against these teams this time. But I think that performance hopefully breeds a bit more confidence into them, and that kind of experience maybe with like a step more. Again, I think maybe one of the more issues that's kind of coming into it as well is that, you're kind of the chopping and changing of who's been there. He's had to play next to Fitzwater and next to Boys into Parks. And it's quite hard for a player to get settled. I think at centre back, you're looking to get that partnership kind of cemented down. And that's to no fault of the management team in that as well. It's like who's been available for selection. There is concerns, I can't lie about it, but, hopefully we can kind of continue from where we left off against Dundee United.
Yeah, we spoke about it in that it's a big learning curve for DeLucas, who's played on the continent the vast majority of his career. Scottish football, I think folk take it for granted sometimes, and it's a lot more difficult than it might appear. And you come up against kind of a lot of physical guys who almost just want a scrap at times, and you need to be up for that kind of scrap as a centre half in Scottish football. And that's something I think DeLucas is quickly learning, is that the physical side of the game's a massive element of your defending in Scotland. And Van Veen's probably one of the best tests he could have at this moment in time, and hopefully he can get the better of him. In terms of how we set up Angus across the rest of the pitch, Andrew Shinnie came off at half-time, so I don't know how much there is in that, if it was a knock that he had. He was playing as a sitting 2 with Sean Kelly. I know you're a big preacher of players in natural positions, but James Penrice obviously came up with the goods at the weekend, playing further forward in the wide areas. How would you like to see a setup?
I think we'll see. Obviously, the 2 Kellys will probably play again, and I think you'll probably see Obianga coming into there. Obviously, I'm not too sure with the Shinnie thing, if that was an injury. I think coming off at half time maybe suggests so. So I'll go with Obianga in there. Although he scored, I'm still not going to put. It
was something we got posed in our last question time, was about Penners playing in different positions. So at the weekend, Davey gave him a load of credit: right wing, left back in the one game. So it just kind of shows he does have that versatility. But I know you're a preacher of the natural positions.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Just kind of going off what you were saying, obviously, before he scored the goal, even you were saying that, he's not being involved too much and stuff like that. I would like to have, maybe a bit more of a comfortable option there who can maybe get a bit more involved in the game. Obviously, not taking anything away from that goal there. But, what do I know? If he comes up with the goods like every now and then that's the end game whatsoever. But, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to, seeing like Bradley kind of starting in there again. I think that, he's probably my preferred option on that right-hand side. But perhaps maybe for Penrice, you're getting that kind of work rate, he's going to track back and stuff like that, and that may be necessary for a kind of a battle against a team like Dundee, against like Motherwell, where, we're going to have to be up for it in every kind of part of the pitch. We can't really kind of let them get an advance on in an area, and, maybe that's going to be the outcome that we need to have with Penrice being out there. But yeah, just overall, whoever's playing, it just needs to be that same commitment, that same drive, tenacity, and whatnot that we've seen on the Dundee United game, and hopefully the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you could probably see Omionga for a couple of reasons. Maybe if it was an injury to Shinnie, but also it's likely to be Omionga's last game at Livi, so maybe the opportunity to give him a little bit of a send-off. I know that's not always the case, the kind of sentimental aspect, but there probably will be an element of that. And that, if Jack Fitzwater is available for selection, I could see Fitzy coming in for that reason as well. So that might play a part in the decision making for these players, playing a part in the game. But let's go on to predictions then, Angus. What are we going for?
When they beat Motherwell, do we? So 1-1.
Thoroughly enough, I was going 1-1 as well. I'm going to go for a draw. I think it will be a pretty closely fought game across the park. But here's hoping we can finish our home campaign on a big high. And as I say, I encourage the fans, the players that are departing the football club in the summer, to give them the best send-off possible so that you can leave the football club with nice memories of our supporters. That would be very nice. I'm delighted to welcome St Johnstone fan Elliot Menzies on to Talk Livi. Elliot, how you doing, mate?
Good. Yourself, mate?
I'm very good, very good. Both of us probably in much better spirits after a much needed win at the weekend, eh?
Yes, I can't complain now. We are secure and I don't have to worry about getting victory against Livi in the last game of the season.
To be fair, the way our away form is, you might actually stand a chance, but I'll come on to talk about you guys' home form as well later on. But it's safe to say it's been a bit of an up and down campaign for St Johnstone. How would you assess the season as a whole?
Carbon copy of last season. From basically going on a wee couple of good runs before, I think, the World Cup, and then after the World Cup, we kind of got a few draws, but after Christmas, we were just on a downward spiral, and we are where we are now, but we're safe. So it's all about next season and rebuilding for that.
Yeah, as you say, kind of the second half of the campaign, said just before we started recording, it's almost like St Johnstone have sleptwalked into a bit of a relegation scrap just before the split. Kind of how concerned were you that St Johnstone might actually be dragged properly into that?
Very. Because at that time, Dundee United were starting to win games out of nowhere, and Ross County were picking up points every so often, and Kilmarnock, we're going about plastic pitch advantage with Livingston sometimes, but Kilmarnock have got the exact same. I think I was reading that St Johnstone are only the third team to beat Kilmarnock this year at Rugby Park. I don't mind the plastic pitches if it's an advantage for you, but you don't have to have the mess of a pitch that we have sometimes. But there is always going to be that slight advantage that teams like yourself and Kilmarnock have on it. And that's why I thought, we're going to get dragged into this relegation battle with them three teams.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned McDermott Park there, and I think a big contributing factor to St Johnstone's struggles this season has been your home form. I think it's 16 points at home all season, 4 wins from 18. What do you put that down to?
Callum Davidson.
Straight to the point, on to the next question.
Right away, no. I don't know. I couldn't put my finger on it. I don't know if it's the pressure of playing in front of your home fans. I don't know if it's the fact that the pitch isn't... I don't want to keep having digs at the groundsman. I've had it before. But sometimes the pitch doesn't look like it's at the top end scale. Now, it's not the problem of, the club not trying. We've tried different things.
You spent a 6-figure sum on the pitch in the summer,
Yep.
did you not, last year? Yeah.
Yeah, we've spent quite a bit of money on the pitch, but it's not worked what they've tried. So it's going to be another summer of try something new. I think it's something to do with the way that the sun is and how low it is. As you come into McDermott, you go down into the ground.
Yeah.
And that's apparently what part of the problem is with the ground and the growth of it.
That's part of the reason we ended up going to the artificial pitch, because one of the goalmouths gets zero sunlight just because of the way the stadium's positioned, and then one corner used to always get waterlogged as well. So, everyone was like, "Oh, why did you tear up your perfectly good grass pitch?" I was like, "Well, it certainly wasn't perfect by any stretch of imagination."
I mean, how long have you had that pitch now? Well,
5 years. 5 years. So you've been top flight again.
It feels longer, but it must be Kilmarnock that have had it for 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Because I remember them being the first, and then Livingston. Was it Hamilton maybe was first?
Yeah, quite possibly.
And I can understand why clubs are going that way. You could have, well, look at your pitch right now. You're not going to really have to do anything over the summer to it, and it's going to be perfect for next season. Whereas we're going to probably dig up our pitch again and be back to square one.
Yeah, it's just a never-ending cycle of money getting invested into it as well, isn't it? But as the kind of home form was probably a major contributing factor in Callum Davidson being shown the door at McDermott Park. What did you make of the decision? Because from certainly a pundit's point of view, a lot of folk always stem back to the Cup double and European football in his first season. But since then, I think from a fan's perspective, it's been such a major decline in terms of the performances and league position, everything like that.
I'm probably going to be controversial, and I'm going to get stick if St Johnstone fans hear this, but he was lucky. His first season in charge, we were bottom of the league at Christmas.
Yeah.
And the turning point was the game against Livingston, I would say, away to you guys before the League Cup final.
That ended our 14-game unbeaten run when Martindale had first came in as well.
Yep, that was basically very much the turning point of St Johnstone going from going down, relegated, to going on to the most magnificent thing that's ever happened to the club. Now, of course, I'm over the moon that we got very lucky, and of course, I'm never going to stop speaking about it. However, even then, there was only a plan A. There was never a plan B. And I think what didn't help is Callum Davidson's signings. In the season, we'll go the COVID season, he was playing with Tommy Wright's team. He brought in 3 players. He brought in, good players like Cowie and Conway and Guy Melamed from Israel. And they did do the job in it. But the majority of the team was Tommy Wright's team. And then when we won the double, we got to keep the squad for the European campaign, which was great. We got the result against Galatasaray away from home. And then we got Galatasaray at home, and we got basically outclassed by then. Then we were playing in Austria. We still kept our core team, but basically we got kicked out on the second last day of the transfer window. And then we sold Ali McCann and Jason Kerr within hours and no replacements. And then we ended up signing players that were just freebies, and the turnover, I want to say it was like 20 odd players. So he was always trying to get that. And then that season, so obviously at the end of that season, he never got to really invest in the squad, but the players that he signed on a free weren't good enough. Basically kept us down at the relegation playoffs. And I will say it, is we were lucky against Inverness because they ran out of steam, and we did actually do well in the second half of that.
The Premiership team always has that advantage, especially if it's a team that's finished 3rd or 4th in the Championship like Inverness had. And, that 6 games in 3 weeks is at the tail end of a long season already. It's always an absolute killer, I think, for the teams 3rd and 4th.
Well, Partick Thistle are way to find out this. Whoever they play between Ross County and Kilmarnock, it's going to be one of them, and it's going to be who's going to have the better legs, and it will all come down to fitness and that. And so that's coming on to my point with Callum Davidson, is he had last season, and I think personally he should have walked because it was always going to happen. Sadly, he wasn't going to turn it around for us to be a top 6 side in one season again. So he was probably, if he wanted to go with his head high, he would go then, and he wouldn't have this sacked on his CV.
Certainly a couple of St Johnstone fans I know, were very much of the opinion, his first season, it'll never be matched in St Johnstone's history again. That season, as you say, it was almost a fluke campaign that happened. The novelty of a team outside of the old firm winning a cup double was just unbelievable. But he was almost the victim of that success as well, in the sense that, you know, anything after that was going to be a decline. But I think they said, you know, guys that I know, it was such a drastic decline, and there didn't, as you say, that lack of plan B as well that seemed to go with it. It almost seemed like he probably should have left after keeping them up and leave on a sort of high, and kind of keep his reputation intact.
Oh, don't get me wrong, I think he's going to be an amazing assistant manager at a different club. I don't know if he'll be a manager again. And I think that's because he was with St Johnstone for years. In 2014, he started being assistant manager.
I was about to say he was assistant when you won the cup in 2014, wasn't he, as well?
Yeah. So he was there. And then he went with Scotland. And I think he's one of the very few coaches to be with Scotland that went on an unbeaten run as an assistant, because Gordon Strachan wanted the youth managers to come in and basically have a couple of games with them. So he left us to go, I want to say Stoke, I think it was. And then he kind of went Millwall and then Dunfermline and then back to St Johnstone as a manager.
Yeah, now he's been replaced by another club legend in the form of Stephen McLean until the end of the season at least. Do you reckon he's in with a shout of getting the gig full time? Certainly he's picked up a couple of important wins, which have, as you say, have now kept you safe for another season.
Well, he's going to be in for a shout because he's a cheap option. As much as I would, you know, love to say anything, I personally don't know about him because he hasn't. This is his first gig. It's 4 games now. Controversially, in those 4 games, is he's only played against 11 men once.
Right, okay.
Got beat and no shots on target against Motherwell. So he's got 2 wins and a draw. Against Hibs was the draw, and the wins were against Kilmarnock and Dundee United, but both games finished 10 men to the opposing team. And we didn't look like we were going to win comfortably, is my only hesitance. So I think the next 2 games where there's no pressure on him, but Ross County away on Wednesday and then Livingston on Sunday, is it? I think it is. That's going to be his real addition. If he wants to stamp his authority, he has to kind of stamp it on these 2 games to show this is what I'm wanting to do next year. Now I've got you safe. This is my idea, I think.
And is there anyone that you have in mind that you would like to see potentially get given a crack at the job?
Once again, I get abuse for it, but Tam Coates.
Right.
He done what any manager in Scotland you want your manager to do, is get you up the league and do well with your team and get you into Europe. But I know you got a lot of stick from Dundee United fans, but it's between him and I would love Ian Cathro, because one, I think the future is going to be going down the laptop route. I know it gets that, but his connections in the game, he would have so many good connections for signing or loaning players.
I've always said this about Cathro from his time at Hearts. You don't work at the football clubs that he's worked at if you're not good at what you do. Mm-hmm. But I think probably the question mark on him is kind of what you said about Callum Davidson. Is he a number 1? Or is he the guy kind of behind the scenes that takes a bit of credit that way? But that would certainly be an interesting appointment, and one kind of that's a bit more out there.
I think they're both realistic, because I think Cathro's in Saudi Arabia, right. Being the assistant to the one he was at Wolves and Tottenham. I forgot his name. I can name him the Portuguese.
Nuno Espirito Santo.
So he's out there, and I know Coates has got nobody at the moment. So it's a realistic possibility that don't have to pay much for him as well.
And one of St Johnstone's key players this year is probably been Stevie May. 7 goals this season, 6 assists. He's been there and done everything at St Johnstone. How key has he been to keeping you in the league this season?
Crucial, but there's 2 Stevie Mays, and I think this is where I kind of want McLean to come in with this, is he's not a lone striker, but he gets played as a lone striker, and that's where I think Callum Davidson's problem was when Nicky Clark got an injury, and it was Clark and May up front, and it was basically running off each other. And
Clark's a player I've always really liked, and he's somebody I've kind of always wished Livy might try and snap up at some point. I thought he was a good bit of business for you actually when you signed him.
When we signed him, I was a bit unsure because it's kind of like, for signing another player from our rivals that's getting let go, why are they letting him go? But then when he came in, it was night and day difference because he had May doing the channels and doing all the things he done when McLean was there. And then since he's got injured, okay, he was great in the Dundee United victory because he was the one that basically put the Australian goalkeeper out injured with a bruised ego. But that's one of the very few examples where he was a lone striker and done really well. But I think he needs support, and if he gets the support and he gets his striker in with him next season, we'll see the Stevie May that we saw scoring so many important goals.
Yeah, and since McLean's taken the reins, certainly looking towards the game at the weekend, has there been any obvious change in style from St Johnstone? Because as we mentioned previously, Callum Davidson was very rigid in playing a back five. It was quite easy to almost preview the games against St Johnstone in that sense. But has there been any obvious changes that you've noticed, Elliot?
Yeah, back four. We've actually went. I've just moaned about the lone striker, but there's actually been more of a player running in like midfield attack through Kearney, who's went into that position. Now, my feeling on Kearney is he's a luxury player. And you don't use luxury players in a relegation battle, but he's at least went into an area where he's helping May up front or Rudden when he came on.
Yeah, it certainly made a bit of a difference for you guys. And who would you say Livy need to be wary of? We've obviously mentioned Stevie May there, Graham Carey as well, certainly coming on to a bit of form since that change in shape. Is there any other players we need to be wary of at the weekend?
Phillips, if he plays. He's the best bit of business that Davidson signed. He made Cammy McPherson actually a better player as well. That's how good he's been. And the saving grace with that, he's on a 2-year contract, so he's there next year. But he was injured at the weekend and we had a young player in his place.
Was that the young lad Ballantyne?
Yes, who would know he was in the stands the whole season and comes out with a man of match performance? I mean, it's well, he was on loan, I think, somewhere, but what I'm meaning is he was our player and we just didn't use him.
Are there any kind of weaknesses that Livy could look to exploit in the St Johnstone side going into the game?
Depends, because we're losing our goalkeeper in the summer. Matthews is going back to Crystal Palace. Now, we've got Ross Sinclair, who's I think he's 22, and there was potential of him being our number one last season, but we signed Matthews in because we lost Clark. Now, I think if McLean wants to stamp a bit of authority for the job, put in Sinclair if he's going to be your number one next year. But then that could be a weakness and, something that you could expose, having a young keeper and having, I forgot the guy that's up front for you, the big powerhouse.
Oh, Nibley, Big Joe.
Who, if he just stands on top of him at a corner, I'd hate to see how bad he would come out on it. But I think that's the one bit that I could see can be exposed as a weakness, but it's more throwing him in when it doesn't matter and get him some experience for next year.
Yeah, it's risk-free, isn't it?
Yeah.
Essentially at this point in the season with you having safety secured. But what are you going prediction-wise then, Elliot?
With St Johnstone, their home form, but Livingston trying to get revenge still for the League Cup final last year. 2 years
By the way, we were actually going to do our first ever video podcast until you threatened to wear your League Cup final tops from 2021, so we decided to scrap that.
I could still bring it out and post it for you. I genuinely don't know now, because I think if it mattered, St Johnstone would have won. And I'm not trying to say that as a dig at Livingston. I just think that you guys are safe, and I think if it meant something to St Johnstone and if we needed a point or just a point, I think we would have won the game. It would have been nervy because St Johnstone don't do anything playing easily. But because of the way that both teams are, I'm hoping that St Johnstone play their youths, or show a team that they're looking for next year and probably get beat. But right now, if you were say put a bet on it, I would have go probably 2-1 Livingston.
I'll tell you what, I'm going 0-0. We've not scored an away goal since the 14th of January. You guys' home form's not been great this season.
That's why you're winning.
Oh dear, but we've been asking guests that have been on recently from opposition teams to come up with a player that's been a great servant for your club, that's played for both, in this case, St Johnstone and Livingston, and then a player that you don't remember quite so fondly. So, Elliot, we'll go with the player that you have fond memories of first of all.
Can't pick between two.
I think I know the two that you're probably going to pick as well.
And they were on the same transfer for only 50 grand. Still
the worst bit of transfer business our football club has ever done.
I mean, you can't even put a deposit on some houses in Edinburgh for that. And we got Dave Mackay and Murray Davidson. I don't like a wee bit of backstory about me is my dad's an actual Dundee fan,
right?
And he's a season ticket holder at Dens. So when I was at school, I had a season ticket at Dens and a season ticket at McDermott. So kind of call me a glory hunter just for picking St Johnstone over Dundee. But and that comes to my next point when you ask about duds that coming up in a second. But with that is I got to see Dave Mackay as a youth before he went to Oxford. And I don't know how he never went bigger than Oxford before he came back to go to Livingston. And I'm not having a dig at Livingston again, but he was so much better than even St Johnstone. And how we got Dave Mackay, we'll not know. Murray Davidson, if it wasn't for injuries, he would never be at the club as long as he has. I mean, we're going about injuries that wreck people's careers. He's got a knee that's made of glass, but he still somehow puts his whole body on the line every time he plays. Sadly, I don't think he'll play for the club again. His contract's up at the end of the season, and he's hardly appeared all season anyway. And I think he's going to have to retire at the end of this season.
Yeah, Dave Mackay was, when we signed him, it was the season we actually got relegated from the top flight. But the thing I would say about Mackay is he had a ridiculous goal scoring record from right back for us.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think a lot of Livingston strikers over the years would be jealous of from Dave Mackay. But he was the most steady Eddie fullback you could possibly ask for. But he also had this knack where if kind of your forward players weren't quite doing the job, he would just take the ball and just go and beat 3 or 4 players and win a corner or something like that.
Yeah.
He just took matters into his own hands. But Dave Mackay was a fantastic fullback for us over the years. And then Murray Davidson, we weren't quite sure on Murray Davidson when he first came into the side because he got sent off in his first 2 games for us. One of the games, I think he got sent off at Dens Park on his debut, and I think he then came back from suspension and got sent off at Capello. Albeit, I think that red card ended up getting rescinded in the end. But, as you say, kind of puts his body on the line, and, his one full season that he had in the first team at Livi was fantastic, and that obviously resulted in the move to St Johnstone. But
was he not meant to go to Parma?
I think he went with 2 or 3 of our other youngsters out to train at Parma, I believe. I think Lee Griffiths was one of the other ones, and I also believe he was meant to be part of that deal. Originally, I think it was for 75 grand. So, Christ almighty, you would have got an even better deal if you got all 3 in the one go.
I'll say the less I said about Griffiths than better now, seeing how the last time he played against St Johnstone, he kicked a flare into the fans.
Yes, in terms of his talent at the time, he would have been an exceptional signing, but his career has certainly gone down a
questionable route,
yeah, we'll put it that way. But in terms of the player you don't have such fond memories of, Elliot, who are you going for?
Right, this is where I've kept it a wee bit away from you, is Derek Lilly.
Oh, right, okay.
As I know, he's basically, as I just explained about the Dundee thing with my dad, I remember going to Easter Road with him for the semi-final in the League Cup, and I think he
scored the penalty in the last minute and down in front of the Livy fans.
He also scored in the final that year for you.
Yeah.
So I know he's a legend, but there's a reason he's not a legend in Perth. I don't even think he scored a goal for us. And that's when, so roughly about the same time as he signed is when I made the decision of, my dad was like trying to make me go more to Dens, and I was like, no, I'm going home and away with St Johnstone. So I went home and away when we were terrible. And he was one of the players that stuck out in my mind. And as soon as you were asking me about duds, I was like, I can't think of many. I know when we were off recording there, you were speaking about Effie Ambrose. He was that bad, I forgot about him. But Lily, it was when I looked down the years and I was like, yep, that's the one, because I think he missed open goals and everything for us.
Oh, Derek Lilly was unbelievable for us. He had 2 seasons, albeit he had the season with the League Cup success and he was a top goal scorer. I think he got 16 goals that season, 16 or 18 goals. And then he had a bizarre move to Boston United down south for about 2 months and then terminated his contract and came back for the rest of the season. So his second season wasn't as successful, in fairness, for us, and that was a bigger struggle, might I say, as well. But that cup winning campaign, he was phenomenal. And as you say, the penalty at Easter Road, he actually slips when he hits the penalty as well. When you look back at it, and my dad hadn't seen that penalty for about 10 years. I think probably on the 10-year anniversary of the League Cup success, we watched the final back on DVD, and there's a kind of extras bit, and it shows Lily's penalty, and that was the first time my dad had ever seen it, because he never watched it at the time. He couldn't bear to watch it. So yeah, Derek Lilly he's a Livingston legend, but maybe not quite so fondly remembered in Perth. But Elliot, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and previewing the game. Much appreciated as always. I mean this in the nicest possible way. I hope Sunday afternoon's terrible for you, certainly for the 90 minutes at McDermott Park. But looking forward to coming up against St Johnstone again next season.
So am I. I'm hoping next season's a wee bit better than this one. But regardless what happens on Sunday, we're staying up, and that's all that counts for us.
That's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. Thanks again to every single one of you for tuning in, week out. If you can, we'd love to hear your feedback. Either leave us a review on iTunes or simply message us on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram.
As Euan said, we're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, so search for Talk Livi to find us and you'll find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well. You can also find all our episodes, including this one, on all good podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. We're also on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If none of those options suit you, all you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you'll find every single episode we've done over the last few years.
That's it for this week, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. As always, let's hope for another great week following the Lothian's finest football team.
Livingston, oh Livingston, the Almonville Lions roar. Livingston, oh Livingston, we realize our vision.